Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this or listening to this. We're going to pick up on tactical, operational, and strategic implications. From 1981 to 1984, U.S. Army Major General Bert Stumblebein commanded INSCOM and personally supervised its remote viewing program. According to now retired M.G. Stumblebein, one of the main reasons his command became involved with remote viewing was its potential for accessing intelligence-related information considered inaccessible. Since INSCOM was in the business of intelligence collection and exploitation, he wanted to improve his command's overall abilities and saw remote viewing as a means toward the end. INSCOM, for example, routinely obtained target site imagery of buildings and other structures, but without human intelligence support, was often unable to determine what activities were taking place at or within these facilities. M.G. Stumblebein was willing to employ remote viewing in an effort to provide this information while simultaneously reducing the risk to human intelligence sources and potentially expanding his overall collection and exploitation capabilities. One of the earliest remote viewing tests that demonstrated the ability to produce the type of non-technical intelligence support envisioned by M.G. Stumblebein and others involved CW02 Joseph McMongle, one of INSCOM's 6 remote viewers. Given a picture of an aircraft hangar, McMongle was asked to describe its contents. In response, he produced detailed drawings in three-dimensional modeling depicting the interior and exterior of a battlefield tank possessing laser optics and computerized targeting systems. The tank was the U.S. Army M1 main battlefield tank, and the test was accomplished prior to the M1 being fielded by the Army, and while the program was still classified. McMongle's performance secured funding for the program for several more years, while demonstrating remote viewing's capability to provide unique, non-technical intelligence support. The information provided by McMongle would have been particularly valuable at the tactical and operational levels of warfare. The aircraft hangar could as easily have been a foreign nuclear or chemical biological production facility, or even an advanced weapons production plant with strategic ramifications for the U.S. In a subsequent operational remote viewing for INSCOM, McMongle demonstrated unequivocally the strategic level intelligence support that remote viewing could provide. Promoted by KH-9 satellite imagery during 1979, the NSC became interested in Soviet activities within a large port of Surovodinsk facility. Initially, McMongle was provided only the coordinates of the facility's location, but during a subsequent remote viewing session was given the satellite photo itself. He reported that the Soviets were constructing a new class SSBN, which contained 18 to 20 missile tubes, and described the welding techniques employed in the submarine's construction. Further, he described the future construction of a canal that would be used to launch the new vessel and provided a time frame within which the launching would occur. Acting upon the information provided by McMongle, U.S. intelligence agencies coordinated overhead imagery assets during the period identified and were able to obtain imagery on the Typhoon-class SSBN before it submerged at sea. The information obtained about the Typhoon during this initial launching proved to be all that was available on the world's largest SSBN for several years, and was regarded as an intelligence coup by the U.S. intelligence community. So, just to summarize that, he was able to produce, through remote viewing, not only describing the location and area where the sub was being constructed, but he was able to also draw pictures of it, and those pictures are included in here. The drawing pictures aspect, which I may or may not have mentioned in the previous video, was something that I think was initially established, at least as far as the intelligence agencies were concerned, when it became a scientific study and a scientific process to start to document and record the phenomenon of remote viewing, clairvoyance, telepathy, ESP. But Ingo Swann, who was also part of this program, and in part, if not, I think 80% in part responsible for many of the program's developments and processes and procedures. But he was an artist, a self-styled artist, and was a self-employed artist, that kind of stuff, living in New York when he began doing work with, I believe it was the American Parapsychology Research Foundation, something like that, the ASPR maybe, or APSR. And he introduced doing ideograms or sketching instead of describing things with words, because he realized, as many philosophers have, and even physicists in some regards have, said that phrasing and words can often create pictures in people's heads that are not relevant to the actual object. So when I say a desk, it could very well be an armoire or a dresser to someone else, or a hutch or a dining table or something like that. Excuse me, because the remote viewer is only seeing certain things and certain aspects through their process. So drawing a picture would eliminate that semantic issue. And in some cases, for people who were not good with words, they were better with drawings. And then even with people who were good with words and able to describe what they were seeing or even feeling in some cases, they may not draw this detailed picture or a detailed picture of something, but they would be able to pull contours and lines that were able, what was called a monitor, not a monitor, is it a beacon? I think it was a beacon, which means somebody that was out in the field, or an analyst who was inside the offices or various offices in specific areas, who were able to take these little ideograms and these little squigglies and drawings and then match them up to actual physical locations or objects or things. So in essence, the person may not have seen the whole picture. Like, these people aren't painting perfect pictures of what they see. Not everyone is. Not then they weren't. But through the little bit of information they were able to retain in their memory, and then what they were able to articulate with line drawings and sketches, people who, let's just call them very good information gatherers on the geolocations, and people familiar with objects and things, were able to then match these up to what the remote viewers were seeing. So it was it's a genius way to approach it all, and it may have been a complete coincidence how it developed, but we do have versions of this in more esoteric and ancient texts, and we call that automatic writing. However, automatic writing is the author at the time going into sort of a trance or a session, and then transmitting what they are being told or see in their own words. And it's automatic because they're not initiating the process. They're working as a conduit, so to speak, and allowing the information to pass through them. However, I think most people at a certain point in their life, they realize that pictures are worth a lot of words and do mean a lot more. And sometimes we can be caught up with the definition of words when people are being too literal or completely driven by taxonomy and categorical thinking. So we'll move on to determining program success, unique human intelligence. Remote viewers were not responding to routine operational taskings. Their taskings represented specific intelligence shortfalls or requirements that had not been satisfied via conventional intelligence collection methods and resources. In essence, remote viewing was the last resort, after established conventional methods of intelligence support had been exhausted or, by their very nature, were incapable of satisfying these intelligence requirements. The context, therefore, in which remote viewing success was achieved fell beyond conventional measurement criteria. Numerous questions presented to the remote viewers were actually unanswered intelligence shortfalls that for years had remained in such status within various intelligence agencies, as no other available means existed for answering them. Remote viewing, therefore, afforded an opportunity to find answers to previously unanswerable intelligence questions. When evaluated from this perspective, the program's success assumes a unique quality, as does the measurement criteria for its success. Tasking agencies and program evaluators generally failed to understand and appreciate this perspective. The overall 35% accuracy of the remote viewers was considerably more impressive when evaluated in this vein. 35% success was a definite advance over the status quo of zero information. While program evaluation was both unique and difficult, the program's secrecy kept remote viewers uninformed regarding how their results were employed. For example, remote viewers would provide source material to a tasking agency that would then use it for its own purposes and assume credit for the success. Remote viewers were generally not aware when this had occurred. Likewise, the tasking agencies never knew whom to credit for the information. Consequently, remote viewers had to continually train the various tasking agencies in how to best utilize their talents and products. Given these circumstances, the full value and significance of the program was likely never fully appreciated, if even recognized, by both the military and government agencies. Determining program cost effectiveness, therefore, became problematic inasmuch as the program's value was probably never fully realized owing to senior officials' discomfort with program association, special access program compartmentalization, and overall secrecy, as well as the lack of a single program manager. Nonetheless, when compared to mainstream technical methods of intelligence collection, remote viewing was very inexpensive, since the only costs involved were manpower and time. Given remote viewing's nominal expense and demonstrated effectiveness for providing novel, if not extraordinary, human intelligence, was it cost-effective and worth the effort when all was said and done? Did remote viewing provide sufficient value added to the overall intelligence collection effort to warrant even nominal expenditures? These are the types of questions one might assume inspired congressionally directed action, which instructed the CIA to conduct a retrospective review of the 24-year remote viewing program. The CIA contracted the American Institutes for Research, AIR, to conduct the review covering the program's research and operations. The AIR report. In executing its contract with the CIA, AIR established a panel that included psychology professor Ray Hyman from the University of Oregon and statistician Professor Jessica Utz from the University of California at Davis. Michael Mumford, Ph.D., and Andrew Rose, Ph.D., AIR employees, assessed methodological issues. AIR President David Goslin, Ph.D., functioned as research coordinator. Science Applications International Corporation, which managed the remote viewing program from 1990 until 1995, was contracted to provide administrative support and technical documentation. Essentially negative, the AIR report concluded that statistically significant effects had been demonstrated with remote viewing, but further replications were required. The report also asserted that none of the remote viewing efforts was ever used for guiding intelligence related to operations. Undoubtedly, a fair program review would have ensured that both hardline proponents and antagonists of parapsychology or paranormal research were excluded from the review panel. Composition of the AIR panel, therefore, proved interesting in that Dr. Hyman was and remains an adamant skeptic of parapsychology, and Dr. Utz was initially considered a skeptic. Why would recognized skeptics be included in what should be an unbiased program evaluation? Did the CIA preordain the negative air report through the very composition of the panel? The most glaring shortfall of the air report was its superficiality. The panel limited its review to the last 2 years only of the program's existence, the period when the program was in participants who had been significant contributors during earlier periods of the program's existence. Looks like there's a bit of a typo there conceptually. So the panel limited its review. We're starting off with number 1. He's giving a list of points. So the panel limited its review to the last 2 years only of the program's existence, the period when the program was in participants who had significant contributors during earlier periods of program's existence. That would be 1. 2. Examine numerous comprehensive reviews, all of which were positive except 1. 3. Apply consistent evaluative criteria for remote viewing. And 4. Discount a discredited National Research Council report whose investigators were kept from the vast majority of SRI's classified data, yet relied heavily on the NRC report when convenient. Why would a review of 24-year program be so limited in scope? Notwithstanding its severe limitations, the air review sufficiently convinced Utz that the statistician that remote viewing was an anomalous cognitive phenomenon that could not be discounted, given that statistically significant results achieved during the 2-year period examined or existed. She subsequently asserted that paranormal phenomena, when held to the same standards as any other area of science, had been sufficiently documented and established. This stance put her at direct odds with Hyman, who insisted that additional research, documentation, and especially replication could be conducted before ascribing the results to paranormal functioning. The debate continues, but according to Utz, replication of remote viewing has already been sufficiently achieved. And they just give a listing of her book. You can pause this and look at that. The Persistent Paradox of Psychic Phenomena, an Engineering Perspective. Looks like Barbara Dunn is on that. Oh no, Barbara Dunn's book, Margins of Reality, The Role Consciousness in the Physical World. Okay, so the air report's assertion that remote viewing products were never used to guide any operations was absolutely false, as singularly illustrated by President Carter during a speech he gave to college students in Atlanta in September 1995. As quoted by Reuters, President Carter stated that during his administration, a Soviet aircraft went down somewhere in Zaire, and a meticulous sweep by U.S. assets had failed to locate any of the wreckage. Without President Carter's knowledge at the time, then Director of CIA Intelligence, Admiral Turner, employed a female remote viewer in the search effort. According to President Carter, she gave some latitude and longitude figures. We focused our satellite cameras on that point, and the plane was there. Furthermore, the citations in CW02 McMongle's Legion of Merit Award belie the official position espoused in the air report. And then they quote what he was, a remote viewer was given a Legion of Merit Award. And here's a quote. He served most recently as a Special Project Intelligence Officer for SSPD, SSD, and the 902nd Military Group. As one of the original planners and movers of a unique intelligence project that is revolutionizing the intelligence community. While with SSPD, he used his talents and expertise in the execution of more than 200 missions, addressing over 150 essential elements of information. These EEI contained critical intelligence reported at the highest echelons of our military and government, including such national-level agencies as the Joint Chiefs of Staff, DIA, NSA, CIA, and the Secret Service, producing crucial and vital intelligence unavailable from any other source. So let's put that into perspective a little bit. The Air report can be found actually on the CIA's CREST library, which is their publicly available Freedom of Information Act library, as well as Stargate files, Grillflame, Gondola Wish, Center Lane, Dragoon, Absorb, and that's Dragon, but it's 2 O's, Dragoon, Absorb, and that goes all the way back to the OSS. And the Air report, when you read it, it's a farce. Like the commander here has written, you can find more information in the declassified FOIAs proving everything was legit and was satisfactorily satisfied in terms of establishing the ability itself of remote viewing and clairvoyance and telepathy and ESP, as well as psychoenergetics. That, you know, this next sentence, which I'm going to kick off in another video, or I'll start this off as another video. But why was the program killed? What lies ahead? The commander starts off this paragraph with, "At every crossroad on the path that leads to the future, the warrior is forever opposed by 1,000 men appointed to guard the past." Paraphrased from an unknown author. So you can see that he's even skeptical here with that title, Smokescreen or Political Correctness. And, you know, I said it in a few other videos, or mentioned it in a few other videos, but the NSA was tasked and actively working on countermeasures of it. And that involved both technological deployment as well as literal psychological operations that the CIA was probably involved in as well, which was really just, I mean, from an esoteric standpoint, you would call it chaos magic. From a legal standpoint, you would call it intentional infliction of emotional distress, and just basically stressing people out to the point where they have no time to sit and think, to keep anyone from potentially accidentally discovering something or imagining something, depending on that person's perspective. And with that said, I'll end this video with a little bit of information that some people, I think some deep researchers probably know, that the military was heavily involved. And it's often said that it's the military, but we have to assume that all intelligence agencies were, especially with their location to Hollywood. But a lot of propaganda comes out of Hollywood, as well as, in fact, many types of movies are pre-approved by intelligence agencies because they're afraid that the writers, artists, and the directors, let's just say the creative people, the imaginative people, the people who tap into the source or the inspiration or are looking for inspiration, might reveal technology. And it's clear that not everything is completely run through the intelligence filters, but we can assume that there is both deliberately seeded information as well as deliberately confabulated or misconstrued information, and that is a deliberate measure. Now, there's obviously some people within social media accounts and, you know, blogs and independent researchers who have tied the movie Stargate to the Stargate program run by the CIA, which was involved with just most people on the surface have only seen this movie, a movie. I don't even think I saw portions of it. I may have saw the movie, but just didn't really watch everything. The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is essentially a parody when you really look at what the remote viewing program was, because that movie utilized, or at least tried to establish, the ability of mind over matter from a military's perspective, and was sort of like an autobiography and documentary of the remote viewing program. And it was more of a comedy than it was anything else. And that may be deliberate, because it's always the opposite, or the way the chaos magic works or the disinformation magic works. It's always some sort of obfuscation. But Stargate goes back to some older, mostly online rumors, but in the early 80s and 90s, there used to be a lot of people that would travel around and tell their stories of being involved in secret programs and things like that. And we have very old myths about the Manhattan Project, Project Montauk, or the Montauk Boys, which has basically inspired the Montauk Project specifically, and the Manhattan Project has specifically inspired what's been popular for the past couple of years in mainstream movies with a series called Stranger Things. So the series Stranger Things is based off of almost down to a few people's specific books who did research on it independently, but it's based on that research. If you're able to deep dive on your own, then go ahead. I'm not going to go too much further in it right now, but we have a lot of they're lies. I mean, it's just lies. I'm not saying they're all negative lies. Perhaps there are some things that were necessary for safety, but if the NSA was creating countermeasures along with the CIA, the military, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, all of them involved, DIA, the DoD, I mean, every tool, every road, every piece of technology is a two-way piece of communication. It's a two-way exploit as well, right? You may, I think I said this before, you may tell me that cars can only go in one direction on that road, but ultimately, given the right circumstances, traffic could figure out how to work itself out and go both ways. So if something was designed as a countermeasure, it can easily also be used as a weapon. And there's no escaping that. Why that's important is because these are not intelligence agency created weapons. These are naturally inborn, innate gifts that every human, even based on their own research, Russian research, Chinese research, Japanese research, and American research, probably even most likely religious research in places like the Vatican and certain Christian esoteric doctrines. These are naturally inborn given gifts. There is no person who is allowed to deny or withhold or negate or take away someone's right to use their own abilities that they're born with. It doesn't matter that the research now that we're reading is intelligence generated, that it was generated and created by the intelligence agencies. What matters is the overall thought that it's not their right. It never was. And I've recently heard on a few videos, and I'll keep this last sign off short, but I've heard a few people mention with very esteemed credentials and a lot of influence as it relates to parapsychology and the psychic phenomena, as well as people who have researched these very documents that I'm reading here and sharing on YouTube. I've heard them say that, could you imagine this? Could you imagine that? What if we did this? What if we... It's all fear-based thinking. All fear-based. It's, well, what if somebody could do this? What if they could do that? And, well, all the ancient texts tell us exactly what we could do. We already know what we could do. We could build things like cathedrals and pyramids. We could, and I'm not trying to take away from sacred geometry or the Masonic knowledge or anything like that, or alchemical knowledge, or belittle that and say that it's all predicated on this type of state of consciousness, this ability, the adepts, the talents, the potentials of people. But it's closely tied, if not on the circle of that path. And we know what people can do with that. They can build architecture that we can't reproduce right now. They had technology and healing knowledge and methods of communicating with each other that were wholly dependent on nothing more than the development of the human temple, the human spirit, the human consciousness. So those people that ask that question and sort of incite innuendo or insinuate that there's something potentially wrong with someone doing this are, I mean, let's be clear, are afraid of other people discovering what they're doing, right? Or maybe they can't do it themselves and they feel left out. You know, maybe because they're not a part of it and they haven't been able to demonstrate any of these abilities, they have no choice but to fear it. And that still doesn't give them the right. Because the real question is what if we learned how to use it? What if everybody was in some way, hey, this is what it exists, this is what we can do, but I'm going to tell you right now, if your behavior continues the way it does, you'll never be able to use this. If you can't become a better person or challenge yourself or push your own self, if you can't push yourself through the challenges required, then yeah, we can do it for you, but you're not going to be happy with those results. But we're still giving people the choice or the chance or the opportunity to use those gifts. And I think right now there are actually a lot of people who do use them, and I think a lot of people keep it secret, you know, because there's still, again, the fear-mongering of, hey, we burned witches 100 years ago. Well, you know, sounds like a war crime to me. You know, it sounds like an inhumane torture program, and you should call it what it is. You weren't burning witches. That's just a catchphrase. It was a war crime. It was a humanitarian tragedy. And we can talk about tragedies all day as it relates to specific religious groups who continually, who constantly, who every day make it a point to remind us of what they lost for their religion. But they do it without any care or remorse or humility or hubris for what other people have lost. So they're not as open-minded, they're not as humane, they're not as close to God as they think they are. They can't be. Because if they were, and they were as open-minded and heartfelt and receptive to God's gifts and God's creatures on this planet, they would recognize what they've done, and they would certainly repent, using their own terms. They would certainly work harder at being something more than what they are. They would study more, they would learn more, they would work harder. And people use these sometimes, again, with the experts who talk about this stuff, you know, capitalism wouldn't survive and this and that and the other thing, and that's actually the complete opposite. If anything, there would be so many inventions on the market, so many diverse opportunities, and so many different manifestations of ideas and art and science that the only thing that would really crumble is the control structure, the constant cycle of the same things year after year, month after month, the same complaints, the same issues, the same concerns. And with that too, we would actually see a much broader scope of communication among citizens and communities, right down to the fabric of families. The family itself would be stronger if the family knew how to use its own gifts. The family would have a better understanding of their children. Children would have a better understanding of their parents, grandparents. There would be greater understanding. There would not be less. There would be no need for war if people were able to utilize their gifts. And you might say, well, somebody could still do something wrong with it, but don't you see that that's not actually possible, because a lot of people would know about it by the very means they use to keep it secret, because, like I said, the road is two-way. So using the hypothetical, the nomenclature as that's often used as it relates to ESP, telepathy, kinesis, where someone touches the source, if someone corrupts the source, the rest of the people that are touching that source are going to know about it sooner or later. It's not a computer. It's not like hacking something and then hiding, you know? In fact, the people who aren't able to use these gifts are the victims, because it's the very people who do use them as a form of manipulation, persuasion, obfuscation that would not succeed if people trusted their intuition, knew themselves better, knew other people better, and had a better understanding of their own abilities. And that would lead us into a topic of abuse and a lot of things that happen to young people and older people at different stages in their life, which probably breaks them from the source. And that may very well be a deliberate mechanism as well. You know, there's very, very old archaic methods for both awakening these abilities in people, as well as kind of, let's just say, taking them away and shutting them down in someone. And now today we have technology and chemicals. So the fear-mongers, and that's what they are, you know, not that you can't express your fears. That's we people, you know, we should express the what ifs, but the what ifs are always what if something goes wrong, and then people capitalize on what if it goes wrong, because those people are the very ones who want to lead you down a specific path, a path that they've created themselves, or completely support, or invested in, or vested in a financial way, a political way, or a spiritual way. The people that don't say, what if it works, those people are usually the ones who are shot down. I guess literally and proverbially, right? Alright, so the next video will pick up on smokescreen or political correctness. Alright, take care.